You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
Come on, man. It's not my fault this time. Actually, it is completely my fault this time.
Yeah, it is. That's what it is. I mean,
wait, did I boop? I booped it.
yeah, you did boop.
Hi, kids. Welcome to the discounted version of On the Trail with Kevin and Scott. I am Scott, the slapstick parts guy. That is my fault for this time being late. And while we always share what worked for us as well as what didn't, like reading said clock, it's always up to you to read your instructions and do things. Welcome to 184, guys. Kevin, take it away.
Hey, folks. Again, apologies since this is at least a day late. Hopefully he'll get home and edit it tonight.
It'll be up tonight.
We were so busy yesterday with a very Jeep-related incident, which will show up. It's already showed up a little bit, a picture or two on Facebook. But...
I have to give a quick shout out. Keep going.
Well, no, I was going to say we had to have a shout out to your significant other, Autumn, who had us come over he was already there, but I made a 2-hour cruise cross state Florida from the Gulf to the Atlanta.
Isn't that weird? It's 2 hours one way and 6 back.
Yeah, something like that. Depends on what time you cross Mouse World.
Speaking of discounted show, George, thanks for the This Better Be Discounted show since you boys are late. We were busy.
We were getting show content, and boy, do we get some show content.
Oh my God! See, so let's back this up a minute. Beep beep beep. I didn't keep parts in the garage for a year, but we're a day late on the show, so it's kind of a balance we're working on here. So, but anyways, no, yeah, it was a very fun day. It's one of those. Autumn learned a very important lesson that sometimes, working on a Jeep is a whole day thing.
Yeah. Even if the part's small.
Hey, I'm happy to report no carburetor parts slung into the atmosphere, never to be seen again yesterday.
No, I was taking parts apart and putting them in bags to make sure that they wouldn't take flight.
And as you were finishing it, Autumn was grabbing it and setting it aside.
Yes.
Grabbing it and setting it aside.
So what did we do, Scott?
We did a lot of things. First off, we started off by trying to drain gas by a small little cheap... Guys, get the $12 vacuum siphon pump. Don't get the $6 one.
The $6 one doesn't have check valves in it.
Yeah. It was literally about to be a Lethal Weapon 3 where, Riggs grabs it and then, Exxon, whatever, because he got a mouthful of Exxon.
Oh, God.
It was almost that point, but luckily it did, and we got the rust drained out of the tank. And
This is one of those things where not once, but several times we would look into the bottom of a aluminum turkey baster pan and go, yeah, gasoline's not supposed to look like that.
Not unless you get it crunchy style.
Yeah. Oh, boy, that was even beyond crunchy and crispy.
Even the filter left the chat, but we'll get with that in a minute.
So anyway, what did we do? Well, we kind of took the fuel system from the fuel tank all the way to the intake manifold.
Yeah, pretty much.
And either cleaned it, replaced it, rebuilt it.
Or broke it. We're not sure about that last part yet. We're still working on that.
So drove across yesterday morning, got up dark 30 and peeled out and left Hinter Nowheresville, western side of Florida, and cruised right across. At that time of the morning, I could sneak through Mouseland with very little impact.
Trauma.
Yeah. And showed up over at the wonderful Deltona Estates.
Also known as Smeltona.
at probably 9 o'clock.
As my neighbors have, I know I am the Jeep guy on the street. And it's funny because a lady was walking her dog the other day. She goes, I see you driving that old Jeep, and oh my God, that's so cool. And I'm the Charger house down the road, because there happens to be like 3 Hellcat Chargers and a Challenger at the one house. She's like, I'm in the Charger house. I'm like, cool, thanks.
Cool.
So I'm the Jeep guy in the neighborhood now.
And so we set up a couple of sawhorse tables and made sure that we had recovery gear to catch things that fell.
Magnets.
Yeah, and proceeded to remove one we thought was a fairly clean Solex single barrel carburetor, which was an option in the Willys. We found out because we thought we had the
The Carter, I think.
The Carter,
Yeah.
one barrel, but Ford decided to be a little different, and sure enough, it shows up in the parts list as the optional Solex, often, quote unquote, often found on GPW models.
Yeah.
Thank heavens that Autumn has the actual military compilation of all the service books and manuals.
Yeah.
And it's a little dirty and dog-eared. And
You can tell where the guy spent
well-worn.
most of his time.
And we're spending too. And so we disassembled this and carefully, because folks, if you've ever worked on a carburetor, even a nice Holly, you might have at most 4 jets for a 4-barrel. Mm-hmm. This is a single barrel.
Yeah,
I think it was 6 orifice valves in that thing, in various positions, 2 internal brass filter screens, a rather unique float system. The float is completely free floating. It's not hooked to the arm. So a little care, a little remember where it went. It was helpful more than once to have another spare carburetor that I could go, okay, where did this go? I don't remember this, because unfortunately you'd think, well, everything's a different size and a different thread. No.
And then they put the numbers of the orifice size or whatever, 132.
So good news is Scott was able to get a good, well fit out overhaul kit.
Yeah.
And we used all but 3 of the ring gaskets, and they're there because you usually have to put things in and take them apart, and so you had some spares thrown in.
Yeah.
But we sat down, and first thing we did, of course, is before we got anything hot, we went ahead and pulled the carb.
Which is a good thing, because you're literally working on the intake and exhaust manifold at one side.
It's very antiquated, but a lot of little tiny clips and cotter pins and springs and spring tabs and just it really made me feel like I was a kid again, because this is what I cut my teeth on, is older equipment.
Yeah.
In that era from living out on a farm with my folks, and the old tractors and the old International Harvester corn binder trucks and those kinds of things. And so it looked familiar. It did look kind of high tech compared to some of them, because again, this was a government contracted carburetor.
Oh yeah.
So think about anything you've seen government contracted. Well, add another port. We can get more money that way.
Exactly. Yes. Reinventing the wheel.
And as we started disassembling it, because like I say, it looked clean on the outside compared to the original one that was giving us fits and broke, as we talked about in several shows ago. That one looked like 1942 and hadn't been touched then. This one looked like, well, maybe somebody's been through it. No, I think somebody just washed it off.
Yeah.
Because what came out of it was pretty, let's use a technical term, pretty skanky.
Yeah, well, the best part, though, is when we found Jimmy Hoffa's wristwatch. Y'all think I'm kidding.
It was close to it.
Oh, my God.
We were pulling out orifice valves. No wonder I couldn't get this thing to tune. Various different metering valves. For those that don't know what an orifice valve, it's a brass little, think of it as a bolt plug that's cross-drilled to let fuel go across the bolt, but then drilled up the center to let it come out. But the center hole is very precisely sized, so that only a specific amount of fuel, or air, if it's an air orifice, can get through. And there are a bunch of them in this little carburetor. And it's funny because it's so tall. The float bowl's the size of a lawnmower carburetor. The diameter was probably 1 3/4 inches as far as the bore size. The actual venturi inside was probably only about 1 inch, but it's like 7 inches tall. It is just this monolith of a carburetor.
It's like a tall glass of carburetor.
Yeah. And, but these orifices, you couldn't see through them. Some you could see across the cross drill, which is where fuel gets into them. But then you'd look down the orifice with a light and going, yeah, no light coming through here. So nothing was flowing there. So
no.
In all honesty, the fact that the Jeep ran at all is actually impressive.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't getting the right amount of fuel.
No.
Or air.
Or anything.
And,
it was getting the right amount of frustration.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, we took it apart and then scrubbed it down with a brass brush. Note to everybody out there who wants to try this, get your brass brushes, get them with wooden handles. Scott had that. Not by planning, but by luck.
No, because I'm cheap.
Because you're cheap. Unfortunately, carb cleaner will melt the plastic handles, leaving little brass whiskers throughout this precision little carburetor.
See, kids, cheap pays off sometimes.
And so it was very good to be able to spray, scrub. Just kept going through part by part. Then you open the bag, and what we did is we set a tray off on my left and one on my right. The new parts went on the left. The old parts, as they got replaced, went in the right. So started off with the left tray full and the right tray empty. And then as we went through, it slowly balanced over until the right tray was full of rather grungy looking stuff, and the left tray was empty except for a couple of spare gasket washers.
Yeah.
Went through the thing, made them remember how many turns.
2 3/4.
All right. He didn't even have to look it up on the phone, although he's not sure. He's checking himself
I'm
now.
doing it now. Yeah.
He actually, it has one idle jet, and so you do have to adjust the kit came with new screw and new spring, and the screw is the needle point on the end for the fuel flow for the idle, and we put it back in the new one in the same setting. We did have to adjust it afterwards, but that was expected. And without going through it detail by detail, after all the cleaning and then part by part reassembly, checking tolerances. There's no float really to adjust. The float floats. There's a little arm that rests on it, and there's like this little. I won't glorify it with the term track, but a little area with bent up edges that keeps the float from spinning. And then the needle valve, which is normally multiple pieces and springs in other vehicles, and this is a pre-made sealed brass assembly. So we put all that in there, made sure that it worked, and it rattled, and it sealed. And that took us about an hour and a half to take everything apart, clean it up, put it back together, put it on the Jeep. And then it took a little while to crank at 6 volts to get the float bowl full. And boy, when it filled up, I was impressed. It fired right to life. And boy, did it fire right. And once it had fuel in it, we had to go back and tighten. I'm a firm believer in don't over tighten carburetor parts. Number one, these older ones, they're brass bodied, and they're aluminum body, and that aluminum is relatively pure aluminum. It's not like the stronger alloys that are made these days.
Yeah.
So it's very, very easy to strip out threads. And the vast majority of the screws are solid brass. Okay. And that's great for corrosion resistance and longevity, but you got soft stuff screwed into even softer stuff, and you can bust it in a hurry. So very light touch, 2 fingers on the screwdriver kind of a touch. And then if it leaks, go back and snug a quarter turn each time until the leak stops. Don't get carried away with the ugga-duggas. I mean, right now, folks, I've seen many a mechanic, quote unquote, I'll use that term broadly and loosely, trying to put in little tiny screws with things like a power screwdriver. Ping, ping, ping.
Breaking the heads off the new Loctite.
Yeah, so I'm really happy with that. I've worked on plenty of Carters. This is my first Solex that I've played with. And complicated little booger, but she tuned really quick and really well. As part of that, we also, while the carburetor was now back on, but before we started, we pulled the tank. Didn't want to introduce old crud into newly clean carb. That was an interesting ordeal. Turns out that the tank, I'm going to use that word very loosely, was a Frankenstein creation.
Yes.
The top of it was the original 42 tank, because I could see the fold seam, one fold seam. The rest of it appeared to be 1/8-inch plate stock. Somebody had flame cut and booger welded all the seams, joints.
There were
patch panels.
Yeah, cutout panels. Yeah.
And I think the original baffle and pickup's in there. Couldn't tell. We did, as Scott said, we drained it with this contraption to siphon with some soft aluminum tie wires to stiffen it, because, of course, the cheap hose has a memory, so
Yeah.
you put it in the tank, and all it wanted to do was curl up like a husky's tail, which makes it a little hard to get it in the fuel.
It was so funny. Kevin's like, "It's all right, Scott." You're like, Hulk smash.
Yeah, no, not when it's full of gas, please.
No.
And then, of
Hulk
course,
splash.
we had some things. Number one, just finding out how the seat bolted in
Yeah.
was kind of an interesting strategy. You have to go in the the driver's rear wheel well to find a screw head. I think it's supposed to be a bolt, but somebody put a machine screw
Yep.
that mounted into the back panel of the seat, and then the two floors, and you lift that off the fuel tank. Yes, you're sitting on the fuel tank, folks. Mm-hmm. Literally, you lift up the bottom of the driver's seat to put fuel in a Willys / GPW.
Mm-hmm.
Two straps came off. They were oddly shaped and kind of long bolts stretched in there.
Yes.
And then we're like, it doesn't want to come out. And Scott, how's the hand, by the way? Is it still functioning?
Mostly, yes.
We were taking it out, and we finally got it to move with a pry bar, but Scott had his hand in an appropriate spot.
Well, I'm trying to pick up the thing like you said. You remove the pry bar, and then there's something shiny over there next to you, scrunch. Like, Kevin. You know.
Scott and the Jeep were becoming one.
If you ever seen Spaceballs where Barf gets his foot run over the statue, and there's a giant like pancake of a foot.
Yeah,
that's what my hand felt. But it's all right. It'll grow back.
We got it out.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem to be any permanent injuries. They all wiggle there, and none of them fell off.
Y'all can just call them the digits now.
But the fabrication, and then the fact that the belly pan was rotted out, repaired with pop rivets and Bondo, which will be
the deeper you dig, the multitude of more sins you find. And I'm just
it's a 1942's vehicle that saw combat, and then it came back and was sold surplus, and wasn't registered anywhere. So it probably lived on a farm or a hunting camp. So I think it's actually doing pretty dang good for its age and condition. But it took some creativity to convince the tank to come out without damaging the Jeep belly any further,
or ourselves
any further. And then we proceeded to start draining what was left of the fuel in that tank. And, ooh, that was not pretty.
Oh, man, it came out chunks, dude. It's like not to be gross. Spoiler alert, if you're eating, it looked like the tank had diarrhea. It was bad, man. Oh.
It was not gasoline looking.
The intention was, I'll just pour this in the LJ and drive the LJ around. No.
Well, you can get a coffee filter and pour it through a coffee filter and get the chunks out.
We got a thing for gas at work.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm just going to put it there,
Yeah. It comes apart. We're too cheap, You just go ahead and scrap it. The new tank went in. It was a snug fit simply because of all the Bondo and pop rivets.
It ain't going nowhere now.
No, you don't really need the straps, but we put them in anyway.
Yeah.
In fact, did you tighten that one back up yet? The back one was loose. Remember that after the joyride? I pointed it out to you.
Hey, so what beautiful weather we're having here today.
So just remember, please tighten that. It's not going anywhere, Scott.
Exactly.
But then we found out that, of course, the fuel level sender.
This was the funniest thing.
Not home.
Yeah.
It was there, but it was no longer with us. There was enough silicone somebody had put on. This was not the factory sender. This is a universal that somebody had stuck in there. I'm not sure what happened to the float. It was
that was a sad state of affairs, man.
The float literally broke in half in our hand. It was a hollow, I think it was thin aluminum.
Yeah, it was thin something.
Split up one side. We did not split it.
Well, no, we found it because all of a sudden you were trying to get the arm to move, and you had to coax it, and like everything was kind of heavy. Like, wait a minute, and you hold it, and we shake it, and it's like,
full of
something,
full of gas. And
floats don't float well when they're full.
The good news is we're able to get the actual sender unit to behave. We just have to get a float and put a float on it when you put it back in. And then we got rid of the silicone and actually bought some gasket material and made a gasket. It's probably not long for this world, but once it was operational, you could swing the arm. The arm had never been bent, so somebody just shoved it straight in without bending the arm to meet the contour of the tank. So it just pounded, and that's probably how it got broke. They probably shoved it in there and bolted it down with that silicone, and it jammed the arm into the bottom of the tank. So I did a little calibrated bending and playing with it, and it still doesn't have the sweep range it needs to truly go full to empty.
Right.
But considering this Jeep is not going to get used as a heavy off-road vehicle, it's got too much historical provenance with its registration now.
Yeah.
It'll probably be a demo vehicle. It'll go to events, and it might piddle around in the mud depending on how much you want to clean it.
No, it's going to see some the beginner courses at some point.
So we know that we have a sender. We can move the arm and get the gauge to work. So that tells us the gauge works, the wire works, and the sender unit. Now you just got to float in it. We decided you're ordering a couple of them, right?
Yeah.
We've got some. It's what they call a pill float for those that know it.
Yeah.
It looks like an oversized,
Looks like a giant pill.
Little oblong cylinder with rounded ends.
So when someone says horse pill, this is what they mean by that.
Yeah. So, and that just snaps into the arm. So,
yeah.
And that went back down. Of course, we were putting the bolts back in, and one of them snapped off, which means that when we take it back out, we're going to have to take a left cutting drill bit and over top of a full tank of petrol. We'll actually do is we'll go through the gas hole and take a rag and hold it under the bolt position so that any chips will be caught on the rag.
Yeah.
And then we'll get that back out and then retap that hole.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those days, folks.
Yeah.
We got everything reconnected. It took a little while to get fuel up to the pump. This has the original, I forget what brand it is, but the glass bowl, inverted glass bowl, not the hanging glass bowl, but the top bowl, double acting pump on it. And it's been fairly good. Once it fueled up again, everything fired up, and then I had to go readjust the carburetor because it didn't know what to do with clean fuel.
Yeah.
And then we ran it around a little bit, Scott, right? I took it for a run. You took it for a run. It actually was getting up to an all-time high of 41 miles an hour.
Which we now know the speedometer is great. And it's funny because, I'm driving around and I'm tooling around and enjoying, getting used to the crash box and all that. And I come up to the one neighbor's house with the hot rod guy. You know? I come pulling up. Uh-oh. And so I'm like, all right. And again, we're having a couple charging issues. And we've been starting and stopping this thing a few times. I'm like, uh-oh. But it was like literally I was like literally 700 feet from the house. Maybe it's a tiny bit more. And I start rolling down like, well, maybe I can make it, because I'm at the end of the bottom of the hill. Nope. Where I was at, it kind of fishbowls that little bit. And I'm like, roar. I'm like, oh, no. I just broke Autumn's Jeep. No. And you can see, even though there's the video I'll upload, there's a bit of panic in me. And so finally I'm like, okay, I just grabbed a handful of throttle, pulled it out, and just, vroom, all right. Then I crashed it down to first gear, gave it the beans, backed it into the driveway, said, Kevin, it's not running anymore. It shut off.
Right as he stops in the garage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, we look and there's no fuel. So I'm thinking about a glass bowl fuel pump, as you can see if you've got fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And, we look in the tank and Scott's like, no, there's fuel in there.
Yeah.
But then we initially go in and take a look and check the line. And no, I don't have fuel. The siphon from the tank is misbehaving, or so I think.
Yeah.
Then we're like, oh, wait a minute. One of the things we wanted to do, we rebuilt the carburetor. Mm-hmm. We replaced the fuel tank. We did not change the fuel filter. There's a lawnmower style fuel filter in this. The factory's one is going to get refurbed, but right now it's been abandoned by previous owners. And we haven't had a chance to tear it apart. We've got to take it off, take it completely apart, get every passage cleaned out, and make sure it's available for the actual media is available for it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Scott bought a new one. I said, but don't change that yet until we've run clean fuel through the lines, because we cleaned out the tank, but we didn't clean out the lines.
Yeah.
We blew them out, and sure enough, we're looking at that thing. That filter doesn't look healthy.
Nope.
I've never seen a gasoline filter that was black.
Yeah. And it was bad. So I put the new one in, which again, to a screw, nut driver in a couple seconds, and boop, it's in. And it was the weirdest thing. We still weren't getting any fuel.
Well, and the thing, we pushed it hard. We got it hot. And that double acting pump, as we said, doesn't look like it's really ever seen the TLC. I'll put it that way. They're able to do an old trick where we disconnected the fuel line again at the fuel filter, and I used an air blower and a rag on the fuel tank and put air pressure. I wanted to get it up through the siphon because we didn't put a full tank of fuel in, which is usually what you need to make it easier to start.
Right.
Because this tank is not flat bottom. It's got a sump to the forward edge, and then it kind of trails backwards at a higher, kind of looks like a ham bone shape from the side.
Yeah, actually it does. Yeah.
And there is a clunk and a following line that goes down into the sump. And so, long story short, when we pressurized, got fuel through the lines, running clear, hooked up the filters, still didn't want to start. We did a little bit more, and I said, we're like completely empty. The pump's empty. Everything's empty. And I'm sure the pump seals are weak. Mm-hmm. So long story short, after another 5 or 10 minutes with a jump box, when fuel got up to the carburetor, she lit off like a banshee again. And we're pretty sure the next step is to get a rebuild kit for the aforementioned pump because it is a completely disassemblable pump. It was leaking fuel, and I tightened the screws a little bit to cut down on that, and that would also make it hard for it to prime if it's pulling air in as well as, so I'm not too worried about it at this point.
Well, you made a comment. It's actually true. Like when you have a Jeep that's when it was built 20 years ago, when it was restored, it saw a lot of 11 TLC.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy took fastidious notes.
Yeah.
He even did compression tests and found out it had burned valves. Mm-hmm. We went back and looked at the book, and he wrote down about how the bearings, they had end play, and so he got a swapped engine, not a new one,
a block, yeah.
A running, kind of like we all do with the 4.0s. You got another running engine, and he just changed out a couple things. He he did a biopsy on the old one.
Yeah.
Got new rod and main bearings, but never installed them. Mm-hmm. So that might be we're hearing a little clatter at the bottom or whatever that is. But the point is, that he tender and love and care, and again took the best notes ever. Well, that was 20 years ago, and now he since passed away. So all the family just saw it as a cool Army Jeep and didn't know the maintenance and love and care it needed.
Yep.
And proceeded to not pay attention. Just to put gas and oil in it and let's go.
Yep.
It's not that kind of vehicle.
No, and that's the one thing that any of you guys that have worked with these early rigs know that they are not anything like the stuff that we have these days. As far as they require pretty regular tweaking and adjusting, and so that's part of what we're teaching. Both Scott and Autumn. Things like, okay, you're going to end up as the seasons change. You may end up having to adjust the idle screws. You may have to adjust, different things to get to it. And we also figured out finally, we didn't do it, but how you do timing, you have to get down back by the starter and pull off a cover plate.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have to bar the engine over until we see the marks, and then probably clean the marks and mark them with a white paint pen. And then I'll show you the tricks and then use like a razor blade to scrape it all off so it just stays in the marks. So that then when the timing light flashes, because here's the fun thing, folks, timing lights don't flash real good on a 6-volt system.
Yeah.
I have an old xenon bulbed timing light. It's an induction, so it's probably 40 years old. And it does work, but on that 6-volter, you almost want to be as dark as you can be. Yeah. I may try boosting it with a 12-volt to feed the actual timing light with a 12-volt and just connect the negative also to the vehicular ground without letting the 12 volts hit the vehicle, and then put the induction on and see if it'll still signal. If it will, we'd get enough light to see by.
Okay.
It seems to be timed well, but at this point, we're in doubt of everything.
Yeah.
We've uncovered now that we know that the thing will absolutely boogie. And it does boogie along. It seems that it wants to do its design speed limit of 45 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And yes, folks, that's pretty much what
that's all she has.
But we've uncovering a few other things as it goes along. We know we need to finish the brakes. They're all working, but they're not pulling evenly. I looked at Scott. I was driving it. Autumn was sitting back in the barn because I didn't want to scare her. And Scott's in with me, and I said, "Good, we're the equivalent of 2 soldiers in World War II, plus probably a couple of kilos in the back."
Yeah,
because we're not exactly small people. And I said, "We're going to do an emergency brake stop." And he kind of looked at me with this, "Okay." I said, "You may want to hold on. I have no idea, how these brakes are going to behave. We only have really disassembled one wheel."
yeah.
And and I didn't do it from high speed. Well, actually, as far as this Jeep goes, I probably did it at half speed.
Yeah.
I was in probably 25 to 30 miles an hour. 1, 2, 3, stomp. Now, to think it squirreled tires,
No.
We did stop in a reasonable, probably 4 Jeep Links for that Jeep.
JKU. Gladiator.
But straight, it was not.
No, she darted hard right.
Well, that was first she darted left, and then as the brake weave rebuilt, caught in first. And I was expecting that, but then all of a sudden, once the heat built up in about 3 picoseconds, she headed for the ditch. And it's like everything I could do with that sloppy steering. That's another one, folks, is that the steering box needs a little TLC or the connectings or it's got that center link steering system there's a reason they don't make it anymore.
Well, it is like we just said a few minutes ago. You're weeding through the sins and neglect, and it's just going to take time.
Well, and what we're doing, folks, in all honesty, is budget-friendly rolling restoration, which simply means we're fixing the obvious problems we see, and that will uncover the next problem, which then Scott and Autumn decide, okay, when can we afford to do that? And then we move to the next problem. We're going to get there. And when you get down to the point that, we need to fix that rust hole or we need to fix the broken knobs, you're pretty much there.
Yeah.
We're nowhere close to that kind of stuff right now. We're into it doesn't charge. The fuel gauge doesn't work. The lights kind of not sure they work. The brakes don't really work right. So, we're kind of in that functional realm.
I do have a question to ask you, though, and this might be, for our listeners at home, because we get tons of email, like always. And again, thank you for all that. When we were looking up underneath there trying to find and see if there's a timing mark on the crankshaft pulley, you saw that left front frame rail. It needs a little TLC, even though it's mostly surface, but it's getting to that point where it's not going to become surface here probably in the next little bit of time. Well, can I just hit that with a sanding block and hit it with some primer, or what could I do to mitigate that, or should I just leave it alone?
I didn't look at it that close, but typically if you've got rust and you want to put it in temporary abeyance, I would get up there with a wire brush, on a drill's fine, and clean up the loose, scabby stuff.
Lots of that.
Hopefully it doesn't show daylight through when you're done.
Yeah.
I would use an etchant primer. As he coughs in the background.
Sorry, guys.
No, I'll show you a can of it out there, but these acid etch primers, and interestingly enough, they're a light tint of OD green. Okay. And I would this is one of those places you don't do a light misty coat. You put a fairly wet coat down because the paint actually has an acid in it that etches the metal and helps to decompose the rust that's underneath and get a good bite. And then you can use the spray can of the OD, the 42 OD green, to top coat it after it dries. It dries pretty quickly. And that will forestall, well, I won't say it's totally forestall for future corrosion, but it will definitely encapsulate and buy you significant amount of time till we can get in there and see and get a micrometer on it and see how much material's lost, whether it needs to be sectioned in or not. Okay. The good news is the frames on the combat Jeeps was significantly overbuilt. And the fact is you're not going to be pulling a howitzer around anytime soon. And if it is, we'll make it out of cardboard.
I think the HOA is probably against me having a howitzer on the front lawn.
I'm not sure. I've seen your neighbors. Sorry.
As he chews peanuts into the microphone. No, I'm kidding.
I did that just to annoy him.
The funny thing was before he started hitting the spring, and it was even funnier when we were working the carburetor. He goes, "Hey, Scott, look, a spring." Doing, 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 doing. I'm like,
well, some people push buttons. I pluck strings and springs.
Put a little spring in your step.
Yeah. So it was a very interesting and fun but long day.
Yeah. And I had I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, if any of you are in the restoration mode, you know what I'm talking about here. You can have a very gratifying sense of accomplishment, but it's also bookended with a, oh bleep, now I've got to look at this.
Yes.
Followed by this, followed by.
Oh, it is the classic just expect every problem.
Yeah.
Just empty everything, or just empty every pocket.
But then when you fire that thing off, throw it in reverse back out of the garage.
Oh, man.
And then put it in gear, and it takes off. And the neighbors are all looking, and people are literally stopping because this thing looks like Sarge from the movie Cars. Mm-hmm. They've got the rag top with the peaks in it, the actual World War II. And it's unmodified. That's the key here. Yes, it's been repaired poorly in some places, but it's got the original seat position. Nobody has stretched the seat for us older, more modern, and larger girth people versus what the World War II soldiers were supposed to fit like. Yeah. Yes, you'll get to that in a minute. I know exactly where you're going. There's so much about it that from a historical buff point of view, it's just people went to war in this thing. Now, granted, yes, it saw combat, but that's not really what the formal use of this thing was. Remember that this was a quartermaster vehicle. It was to haul. It was a quarter-ton delivery vehicle, and it ran that last run. Well, it was used for everything, but the whole idea of the concept, if you read the solicitation for bids and design, was, a lightweight, rapid delivery vehicle, all-terrain delivery vehicle. And the idea there is you could put a bunch of cases of ammo in it and go zipping up right to the back edge of the front and then throw this stuff to the soldiers and turn around and boogie back out of there.
Yeah.
And do it even if there wasn't a road. And kind of a neat history when you think about it. That's where the Jeep got its start. But you also realize that this thing, it needs TLC. It's a piece. It's a weapon. Is what it is. Like we talked about in the registration. This is part of the weapon, the combat tools of the Army, and it's the transition vehicle. To me, this is so cool. You know what was doing the job of this Jeep before the Jeep?
The horse.
The horse. Yeah. This took over for the horse on the battlefield. These Jeeps probably pulled a howitzer that was pulled by horses, during World War I. And until the new ones were built. It's just so much history to get into and actually go, I'm sitting in something that a soldier sat in World War II. Yeah. We know that on this one.
And that's the interesting thing with all things. Like when I'm driving around that thing, oh my God, that thing's a hoot to drive. But
steering is so loose, but it tracks well.
It does.
Which is good. But you've got probably, I'm going to say 15 to 20 degrees of free play.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's really funny is Autumn got this project for the main reason of her dad. It's the same age as her dad, and her dad. Now, he says he drove this Jeep in the Korean War, and he might have, but I think we're thinking he drove the Dauntless V6 ones, the CJ.
Could be, but...
Yeah, because he was in the Korean War.
Yeah, I get that, but a lot of the Korean War, depending on when he was in there, was carryover to World War II equipment until, unfortunately, America went into that war thinking, this is no problem. We'll be in and out in the day. Yeah, it didn't happen.
Meanwhile, 4077. But the interesting thing is that he wanted to drive this thing. Yeah, and so he tried to get into it, and so needless to say, Autumn took her dad for a ride, and there's a video of that online. But the funny thing is we're sitting there when you talked about big burly men getting in this thing and didn't have the seat position. Yeah, this dude's over 6 foot tall. Yeah. And he is built like a brick building. And so we're sitting there and we're talking, and he goes, I'm going to get in this thing. I'm like, okay. So he does. I help him get in there. He gets in there. He goes, I'm in. Quick, get Autumn. Okay, yes, sir. I run in. Autumn, come on, check out your dad. Bring the butter. Because I don't think we're going to get him out. So there is a picture of him in that Jeep.
In the driver's seat.
An 80-year-old man in an 80-year-old seat in the driver's seat. an 80-year-old Jeep, and he got out, and it was a big moment. And then he goes, "I'm going to do it again." And bear in mind, the guy's got COPD. He's wheezing. We're like, "Are you sure you should do this again?" "No, I want to prove it wasn't just a fluke." So he gets in it for a second time. And so we're all watching this, and then my stepdad, he's half my height. He jumps right in.
Yeah, well.
And he takes it for a spin and comes back. And her dad was a little hurt about that. He's like, "How did that little person," then that's not the word he used. It's no fair. You could jump in and drive that thing. I'm going to get in there and I'm going to drive it. And I was like, "Okay, Dad." But you talk about all the.
I was thinking about that actually. Sidebar, quick one here, Scott. No, this is not planned, folks. We need to get some tubing, and we can build a seat that will bolt to the same spots, but that would be set back.
Oh,
and then keep the factory one so that you can put it in there and only 3 bolts to pull the seat. Wouldn't be that big to put a seat in there.
His name is Butch, so that'll be the Butch seat. So, but it's.
We're sorry, folks.
But you made a comment about how this thing was used, and the reason why the top speed was only 45 miles an hour is because it's chasing a Sherman tank down the road.
Yeah, it wasn't chasing; it was leading
a Sherman tank. So another thing, Patrick actually just sent us a message this morning. He got one of those military trailers, surplus trailers with the round hook at the front.
Right,
and he's all excited. He goes, "I bet Kevin is all about these things," and it was really kind of cool, similar to the one that Ron had. And but that's one thing Autumn would like to get eventually is one of those trailers. I'm like, let's get this one running and stopping first before we think about where we're going to keep it. I got to find out where I'm going to get a trailer and a place to tow this thing because I don't want to flat tow this thing on 2009 tires.
Yeah, no.
I did. I'll flat tow it to the Winn-Dixie, but which is down the street. I am not flat towing it any more than that.
No, and with that front steering box, I'm afraid that would be a dangerous scenario.
Yeah.
No, I suggested to Scott yesterday that maybe he looked into an enclosed box trailer. Mm-hmm. This thing is small and it is light. I mean, it's under 3,000 pounds. You could put it in a small box trailer, and that could be its storage part out in the backyard.
No, it's staying in the garage. It's not allowed to go anywhere near the yard.
Why? Because you closed box with a lock on it.
It
gotcha. No, I got you.
That's the missus, and she says it's going right here. She goes, "Now, when you get your drum room and shop built, you can go there and you can bring your LJ in the garage." I'm like, "Okay, that'll work." But again, that's another thing. Speaking of LJ. So my clutch bearing is still not fixed. The good news is, though, I've had the part now 2 weeks. So we're taking bets on
insufficiently aged to be installed.
Yes, so we're taking the over and under. What do y'all think it's going to take me to put this clutch bearing as? So bring it up on the Facebook page if you want to. But I want to get that thing because I actually thought it fixed itself because when I had to move it.
They don't fix it.
I know, but I got to run the block. I'm like, man, she wanted to run. I'm bringing through the gears, and I got the last 3/4 of the way around the block, and it started making the noise. I'm like, oh, why can't you fix yourself?
They just don't.
I don't do that. I know, but I want to get that. I want to get the LJ back on the road. I really do. Mm-hmm. I miss driving it.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't driven that
the
thing
old retired guy with time on his hands going, yeah, no, just do it.
Well, you've actually been busy in the garage for yourself.
Yes, I have. It is an off the road vehicle. It's just not the Jeep, and folks have seen it on the What's He Up To, and I need to post a couple updates. But the Cub Cadet Big Country is. Did I really pump you up with that much gasoline? And
no. This is the lavender Swiffer floor thing I used at work that's now trying to kill me. If it was sage, I'd be worried.
Parsley?
No, sage.
Thyme.
No, you got plenty of time. No, but the sage, like for evil spirits.
I know what you're saying. You're just not getting the old song reference.
I am not actually.
Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme.
It's like a Beatles song.
Yeah, no. Oh, God. Okay, we will leave that be.
Okay, that's a lunch discussion here in a little bit.
I'm going to get the clip, folks, and play it for him
gotcha.
on the computers. Anyhow, back to where we were. Mm-hmm. The UTV is mobile now. I can move it around. Took Scott for a little buzz in it. Working on some wiring, still have to build a front bumper, waiting on a few parts for turn signals up front. I am making it registerable, not registration in the sense of a tag in Florida, but you can run it, I think what they call low-speed vehicles, can run up to roads with up to 35-mile-an-hour speed limits And they're not really supposed to. You're going to take that out?
I'm going to take that out, yeah.
Okay. So they run, it runs really, really well. I still have to do a front end alignment. Now that I've got all the bent and broken parts gone and straightened back out those that had to be straightened.
You got to see that picture of what you did. If you haven't checked it on our Facebook page of how Kevin straightened that frame, do yourself a favor. That was like some shade tree genius right there.
That would be sketchy excrement.
Yeah.
That was me in desperation by myself going, how do I do this and survive?
Hey, that's how they did it back in the old days. A field repair.
There was definitely a field repair. Might not have been a tractor. It might have been a tank they strap it to. But anyhow, I used every vehicle in my fleet other than my wife's car, which was at work, along with the winch on the Jeep and a snatch block to double the pulling power to remove about 2 inches of twist out of a frame. And it worked. Mm-hmm. Was it scary? Yeah, the little buggy's floating in midair like it's hanging on a laundry line because the tension was high enough, somewhere north of 9,000 pounds because it stalled at 9,000. That's why I did the double back with the snatch block. And so I'm going to probably guess by the noise in the winch, I was probably somewhere around 14 to 15,000 pounds of pull before it finally, the metal went and started moving.
Relaxing.
And then started doing what they call stress relieving with a hammer. You've got to do that if you ever pull frames. You can't just let it go. It'll pounce back to the bent spot. And that's just a matter of, as it's de-wrinkling, you have to kind of tap the tops of the wrinkles to let them sink down. And if you can get to both sides, it's even better. Just kind of work the metal back into its original position, particularly when it's been set for, this thing has been set for 5 to 7 years. And she's back to level and within a 32nd of an inch of perfectly true to each other on right and left side. She's steers fine. Plus, I got to learn how to do plastic stitching and plastic welding.
That was cool.
I'm able to recover the right front fender that had been driven into a tree. It's the black... I'm not sure what the plastic is. It's not ABS, but it could be a polyethylene or polypropylene type of a material, whatever. It's a flexible.
It seems very similar to the plastic used on bumpers now.
Yeah. And so I picked up a stapling and welding kit, and it's kind of a neat concept. It's a little wire that goes in the end of what looks like a soldering gun with 2 probe ends sticking out, and the wire goes in there, and you can't just grab the plastic and set it because the plastic, after it's been damaged, takes a memory set. So I'd read this doing some research and used my heat gun and heated up a larger area of the plastic. And wearing welding gloves and using some wood pieces to push, I was able to slowly work. It took me probably an hour to work all the pieces back to where they were just cracked, but they were all in the correct position. And it was staying by itself. Then you go along with this little gun and the zigzag, it makes little sine wave, zigzaggy shaped wires, and you bridge the crack with those. And you don't put them long way across, you do them short way running with the crack. And if you realize that, that makes each one of the curves kind of just is like stitching. And so the very first one, I held it too long, and you can see the wire kind of coming out the other side. I was trying very hard to save the camo pattern, and I think I did a pretty good job on that.
Oh, yeah.
But you push them, try to get about halfway down, let go of the trigger, hold it for, 3 seconds till it congeals again and slide, and then the little wire stays in and the gun comes off. You put another one in, move another inch down, and you just went all the way down. Then I took the side cuts and snip, all the little arms that were sticking up. I did an extra step that was recommended by somebody on one of the pages that was talking about this, and I have a little flap sander wheel, about 2 inches. No, it's about 3 inch, and hooked it in the drill and ran up and down the crack line, and it actually takes the sharp points off the bottom of those little pins that are sticking up, and it makes them very nice and clean. And then you take the plastic they provided, and it's like a welding rod, and you put a little spatula tip on the gun and you heat it up, and you have to heat the base up until it gets molten. It's just like welding. For those of you who weld, you got to create a pool first. You get this soft plastic pool, and then you start feeding in filler material, and you can work it around and went all the way down. And every one of and you could tell real quick if it didn't bite, started to delam, you just went back in and heat it back up. It was kind of neat. So it was surprising how much structural rigidity came back into the part. And then the top side, I could have heat welded both sides, but I didn't want, again, I've got this is a camo kit, and it only came on certain models of this. And so I went on top, and where it needed to be, I shaved it down with a razor where my welding, quote unquote, had protruded through. I mixed up some JB Weld for plastic, and I worked it in there, and then before it set up, cleaned it all off with a body scraper and wiped it clean, let it cure, and you can still see it, but the gray of the JB Weld and the black of the plastic extrusions kind of go well with the camo. You really don't see it unless you go hunting for it.
No, you don't. Is that the same stuff you used to repair the door panel on the TJ, the crack?
Yep, still going.
Makes you wonder if you can't use that same kit to repair to actually do a proper repair.
They actually make a version of that I was looking at that is made body filler that's flexible for the bumpers and stuff like that.
Interesting.
It's supposedly it says on the filler, not a structural item. So that's why you would use the wires and the back welding, and then you could finish the front with a flex. Probably better to replace, but in this case, these parts haven't been made for a decade.
Because your repair seems to be holding up rather well.
Yeah, so far so good. And I mean, I've gone out and done some. Took Scott, showed him that this thing has some neat features about it that road manners are good, and you can take it off road immediately, and it's marshmallowing along quite nicely.
It absorbs a lot of the bumps. It's actually rather soft and comfy.
Yeah, and particularly once I get some good seats on it.
Yeah,
these current ones are camo in their own way. They're early duct tape. And what's the other stuff? I can't remember, but LP siding tape and these various.
These seats are the antithesis of field repair.
Yeah. So, but it's been a fun little thing. The shifter works beautiful. It's kind of a neat little structure.
That is so cool.
Finding, for those that didn't catch the earlier show, sway bar link off a TJ, cut off so it has about a 1-inch stub, and then drilled a 3/8 hole down the middle of it. Ended up cross drilling it with a 1/4 inch, ended up in my case, a 7-inch long 3/8 bolt with a head cut off, put the head end in the hole, rosette welded on either side because I didn't want to mess up the plating.
Yeah.
A dune buggy shifter bellows, some semi-tire mud flat material as a base plate, and then a Ace Hardware T-handle knob that was in the bin boxes if you've ever been to your Ace Hardware. And I've got a really nice in-scale T-handled shifter in the middle console of this buggy.
And the cool thing is, as the kids would say now, it's a short throw shifter.
It is definitely a short throw. It moves about an inch. Click, click, click.
But it works.
Oh, it works. And then you're talking clutches. This has a Comet CVT system in it. If any of you are in the buggies and off-road and go-kart eras, the CVT, which is the variable pulleys that as you spin it up, it gets bigger in the drive pulley, and the other one has a spring that lets it get smaller, so you get a continuously variable ratio. And it had a 780 series, for those that know what I'm talking about, which is the dome type. And it was basically garbage.
Yeah.
It had been used for 20 years. The dome had been scored horribly. The rollers didn't roll anymore. They just ground into it. Yada, 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 broken springs. And you can't buy it.
Yeah.
Because it was custom made for this machine. But shifting part numbers and leaning on some friends that are in that arena, they said, try this one. And it's a Chinese import. It's listed as a basic 780, he said, but it's good for up to your 18 horsepower. And more importantly, your 1,000 pounds or 1,800 pounds gross vehicle weight, I think is what it is. He says it won't burn out at that point.
Nice.
And it's the right bore size and the right belt size. Put it in there. They were dead spot on. Nice. It actually goes into neutral when you let your foot off the gas and you come to a stop, which means I can shift it
Well, you're saying the one point it was making like a clang noise, but this kind of stopped. Like it doesn't.
The clang was in the old one that because of the broken return springs, you had to turn it off to get the thing to actually release and go out of gear. So, long story short, that's where that is. I'm now on mundane stuff, like I wanted to add brake lights and marker lights to make it registerable in the state of Florida, and because I do want to take it to events as a runaround vehicle. And so I'm waiting on a few extra light parts because I can't do anything, sketchy. I got to have the right lights to the front lighting system.
Oh, yeah.
And let's see, going to get new seats, and I got to get new headlights. I only have one. The other one is probably one with the tree. And the one that I have is pretty...
It's time.
It's time. I tried polishing it, and it's just not going to be it. So they're available. Fortunately, they are used to this day on certain off-road vehicles, so they're still available. And then I've got some future plans. But right now, once I get the seats and the lights in and operational, we're done with the restoration part, and she's going to be put to use.
Oh yeah.
So
well, it's kind of cool because like that plastic repair kit that you did, you can do that with your own plastic flares and stuff like that on Jeeps.
Yeah.
The idea of stepping outside the realm of okay, that's part's discontinued. Well, you do a little digging and found something that would work in its place. A lot of these things that you've done do hold true to the Jeeping lifestyle.
They do. If you have your flares and you crack one, this plastic repair system would work. And if you take it my way, which is do all the structural stuff from the inside and leave the outside as is, and then just simply fill that with a plastic compatible flexible filler,
right?
Or JB Weld, which may not be that flexible, but it definitely sticks to plastic.
Yeah.
And then you can mist coat it and get it to match. And even if it doesn't match, it's a battle scar. But at least it's not flapping in the wind.
Exactly.
So that's just kind of my thought on it. It's something different. Still off-road, very off-road, locking differential and the whole 9 yards off-road. And but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
That's the best part about it. And speaking of what you said about taking this thing to events, the end of this month, 2 weeks from today when we're recording, we'll be in Jeep Beach.
That's right. We will be in Jeep Beach. I'll be there Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sunday be leaving. We'll be arriving Wednesday evening. But Scott, you now that you live close, you don't actually have to spend for a hotel.
That's 20 minutes up the road for me, practically.
Yeah, so you can bebop over. I don't think I'd still bring the Gpw.
Not yet. It's not time because again, that's one thing Kevin and I were going to talk about. Like this is going to be an event Jeep. Like when we talked about she wants to off road it.
Yeah,
I'm kind of hoping we could have it reliably ready for Jeeptoberfest, maybe. So that way she could take it off road for a little trip to see if she likes it. But more importantly, though, again, crawling for the fallen, I'd kind of like to have it out there for that little event. Because Chrissy and I have already been talking a little bit, about the names again this year.
Yep.
So, but again, that's what's coming up, and I'm excited. Not even though I am working, and me and Kevin's playtime can't be like it used to. I am kind of happy with how again, it's good to be back at work. To be honest with you, and then doing what I love for the most part. So, anyway,
I'm going to be up, as mentioned before, in the Bantam Jeep Heritage Festival, and thanks to those that have emailed me that have offered some off-roading opportunities. And I'm stalling because I can't find your name. So I apologize for that. But unfortunately, we're on a very, very, very tight schedule here. This is not just my trip, but my wife's, and we're like I said before, we're going to be kind of doing a little bit of a round robin, and so we really don't have the opportunity to stay after the event is over. Having said that, keep an eye out for us. Slightly altered, a black TJ with a silver Ram Air scoop, and she's tramp stamped on the hood, is slightly altered.
Yep.
And we'll be wearing the show T-shirts, walking around, and I'm not going to do anything at that show as far as an official duty. I'm going just to
Enjoy.
and be a participant, but I'm more than happy to chat with folks if you want to show up and ask questions or meet or just say hi.
So, same here. We had a gentleman reach out saying, ask him if we're going to Jeep Beach, and we're going to be there. And I said, look for us because.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, and I just look for us. We'll probably be in the Metal Cloak booth or whatever.
Yeah, we'll be wherever. The other thing I was going to say is we do know that Riley from Riley's Rebuilds,
Yes.
the young lady who is rebuilding carburetors, a young person getting into a lost art. It's fantastic. She is going to Jeep Beach.
Sweet.
And she is a Jeeper. She sent some posts out there. She just, unbeknownst to me, she's local here in Florida.
Yeah.
Well, kind of relatively local. And so, give a hi out to Riley. This is somebody that's really taken a step in life. It's an oddball turn for someone of her younger age. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. And the response has been great.
Yeah.
So,
she was invited out to Edelbrock. It's her and actually a few of her friends.
Yep.
And then they run the business, and again, it's family owned. And I'm sure you'll see their T-shirts.
Yep.
But again, she's had a remarkable turnout and tons of support from manufacturers, Jeep, and companies. She actually went out to SEMA. So again, say hi. The whole 9 yards. Because again, getting into the car culture and some of these things. You got the hoodlums out there doing donuts and takeovers and their Chargers and Challengers and and you see the Facebook post. But then you got the other side of the coin, people like Riley, young people that are very interested about the passion, the motorsports aspect, and the like we preach wheel legally, they race legally.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. But yeah, we'll be at Jeep Beach. I'll be up at the
Phantom Jeep
Festival. Yes. I'm sorry, so much going on in there.
You can tell it's getting close to lunchtime. Our blood sugar's a little low. We need to refuel a little bit.
Oh, heavens, it is.
Yes.
It's actually past lunch a bit.
Yeah, I know. That's why my stomach goes going.
Okay.
So.
Well, anyway, folks, I think we've kind of run this one in full circle.
Yep.
So, as we say correctly, I think it's time to lock hubs, put the Jeep in 4-low, and go hit the trail. And
make sure
we always ask you, please make sure, take nothing but
pictures, memories, and trash when you leave the said trail.
We want to keep them clean and open for our kids and our kids' kids and generations unpanold, because unfortunately, when they're abused, they do close them down.
Yeah, and we can't afford to lose any more. Actually,
that's right.
So that
will be on the air again in 2 more weeks.
Yes, what show 185?
185, and a teaser is we're going to talk a little bit, I think, about what makes the tire go round or something like that, and how to keep it turning.
Hey, we won't spare the details any longer. We'll get around to that show next time. So with that, I'm going to stop these puns and tell you guys and gals, adieu.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye. Proceeding has been provided for entertainment only. Proper service and repair procedures are vital to the safe, reliable operation of all motor vehicles, as well as personal safety of those performing those repairs. Standard safety procedures and precaution, including the use of safety goggles and proper tools and equipment, should be followed at all times to eliminate the possibility of personal injury or improper service which could damage the vehicle or compromise its safety.
What he said. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
This has been a Vent Axle Media production.